Congratulations on making it to the end of Chapter 3 of the Complete iOS Developer course. Let's take a couple of moments to see how far you've come. We're now pretty familiar with the Xcode interface. We know about the different panes and the different windows that we can bring up, and we know that we've got our file structure down here, that we can create our app by dragging in objects from down here and then editing them to make images or labels or buttons and displaying as we like. We've also written a little bit of code already that responds to a user's tap and then updates the user interface depending on what number the user has put in. So that really is a lot of new knowledge and capability that you've generated. So congratulations on that already. In this video, we're going to try and put this all together to make a pretty simple app that asks the user how old your cat is and then works out the age in cat years. So I've done a lot of internet research on this, and my understanding is the general conversion from human years to cat years is to multiply by 7. So if your cat is 3, you multiply that by 7 to get 21 to get their approximate age in human years. So pretty straightforward app, and you can see that hopefully it's going to use all of the user interface elements and coding techniques that we've learned so far. Now, with most of my challenges, I ask you to go and try it yourself and then come back and watch me do it if you had any problems. For this one, because we're fairly early on in the course, unless you're more familiar with programming, I'd recommend actually following along for this particular video because we're going to be doing some slightly more advanced coding than we've seen so far. But if you want to give it a go, and at least if you want to do the app layout, then you're very welcome to give it a shot. And so I'll give you a moment to pause the video now, and then I'll run through how I would make that particular app. All right, so I'm going to start completely from scratch this time. So we'll create a new project, just like we did at the beginning of this section. And we'll choose a single view application, and I'm going to call it AppCatYears, and all the other options will remain the same. And then I'm just going to save it with my Hello World app on the desktop. So there we go. And I'm going to start by building my interface in main storyboard. Here we go. So as before, I'm going to get rid of that view there, and I'm going to set my view controller to have a 4.7-inch iPhone screen, just to make it easier to do the layout. And then let's start adding some labels. So I'm going to start by bringing a kind of title label. So this is just going to say cat years. I'll make it nice and big and center it. There it is. And I'll center the text. Increase the text size. And for a bit of fun, I'll choose a wacky font of some sort. Let's try Papyrus. Wonderful. So that looks good. I'm going to change the color as well. Green. Wonderful. Okay, so there's my title. I'm then going to bring in another label, which I will center as well. What is your cat's age? Nice and simple. I'm going to leave that as the default size and font and everything else. There we go. And then we're going to need a text field for the user to enter their cat's age. And because they're only entering a number here, I'm just going to leave it as the default width. But I am going to change it so that the keyboard type is the number pad, because we definitely want a number in there. And then I'm going to add a button for the user to press. and that's going to say find age in cat years. There we go. So it's already looking quite nice as an app. I'm going to add a second label in there, which is going to be where I put the result, so the outcome, the number of years that it is. I don't really want to update that label as we did last time because that wouldn't look great. So this label I'm going to keep as there, but it's going to be empty initially, and then I will fill it with the text later on when they've tapped the button. And then finally, I'm going to have a nice cat image to make it look pretty. So I'm going to jump over to Finder. There's my cat image. You can obviously use any image you like. And I'm going to drag that in and leave all the options as default. There it is. And we're going to need an image view to display that. So I'm going to drag it to the margins there, and we'll see how that displays. So let's just choose cat.png. Very nice. Okay, so that looks pretty good already. I'm going to change it to aspect fit just so that we get exactly the right aspect ratio for this cat. Wonderful. So before I write any code, I'm just going to run that and make sure that that looks nice and that everything's laying out as it should. There we go. Fantastic. And if I tap in there, then we've got the number option. Wonderful. So now the fun bit. Let's get rid of our 3 panes and bring in our assistant editor, because we're going to need to start creating some outlets for the important things. So first of all, let's control drag from that text field into just under where it says class view controller. And I'm going to call it cat age text field. There we go. So I'm really clear what that thing is. Then I'm going to bring in my label. So again, control drag. And this is going to be the label where I put the result. So I'm going to call it result label, like that, capitalizing the L. And the last one I need is an action coming from the button. So again, control dragging and dragging it in there. And I'm going to call that find age. And of course we want an action here rather than an outlet. There we go. One thing that's worth mentioning here is that it's easy in some cases to delete an outlet from the interface builder over here, or to delete it over here, but then not to delete it in the other one. And that will give you an error. So if, for example, I remove the code for my find age method or function there, and then I right click on the button itself, you can see a list of all of the functions and other settings of the button, but the one we're interested in is this find age. Now, I've deleted the code for the find age method, but I haven't deleted the outlet that we created, or the action that we created. So if I try and run the app and then tap on the button, we get this nasty crash. So the simulator will stop, we get all sorts of horribleness everywhere, and we get this nasty unrecognized selector set to instance, which isn't the most straightforward to see what's going on error message, but that's what it means. So if you get unrecognized selector sent to instance, you've probably deleted some code for an outlet without deleting the outlet itself. So I'm going to put the code back in. If you wanted to delete the outlet, then you could just click on the X there when you control tap or control click on the button. But that's something to bear in mind if you accidentally delete some code relating to an outlet. Okay, So now we want to do something clever. So let's just get rid of the label text because we don't want anything on this label initially. And then we don't actually need this anymore. So I'm going to go back to our single view and just have our viewController.swift file coming up. So let's remind ourselves, what do we want this app to do? Well, we want it to get the value of the cat age text field, multiply it by 7, and then display the result in result label. Nice and straightforward, right? Well, there are a few slight complications that we'll come to, which will introduce us to a number of important concepts in iOS, which we'll meet again and again throughout the course. So let's just start by changing the result label to the value of the cat age text field, just as we did in the previous video. So we do that by selecting result label, and we want the text of the result label. So I'm just pressing enter there to use the auto predict. So result label dot text equals cat age text field dot text. There we go. And let's just run that. And just before we run that, there is one thing we're going to need to change. If we go back over to main storyboard, now it's difficult to select the result label because I deleted the text in it, so we can't actually see it. But that's what our view list down here is good for. So I can now click on result label there, and you can see that it doesn't really have any width or height. And that means if we update the value, we're not actually going to be able to see it. So let's give it a nice stretch out, and we'll give it a full width. And it will be good to center it as well, so that the final text is centered. There we go. If we don't do that, we wouldn't be able to see the result at all. So let's now run that, and we should find that the cat age appears round here when the user enters it, and of course taps the button. So if we put in 32, for example, very old for a cat, but there we go. We get our result. Fabulous. Now, there are, as I've mentioned, a few complications along the way of taking this result and multiplying it by 7. So what we're going to need to do is to extract this value and set it equal to a variable so that we can multiply it by 7. We can't do anything with it in its current form. So how do we do that? Well, we haven't really seen variables before, so let's just have a brief introduction to what they are. To create a variable, we use the keyword var, and then we type the name of the variable that we want. So let's say we want to call the variable cat age. Reasonably sensible. And then we're going to set that equal to this as before. So cat age text field dot text. Okay, so now we've got a variable called cat age, which is equal to whatever the user has entered in the cat age text field. And now we want to multiply it by 7. So the obvious way to do that might be to say cat age is equal to, and then whatever it was before, which you'll remember is what the user entered, and then multiplied by 7. This asterisk or Shift 8 on my keyboard is the standard symbol for multiplying in any coding language. So now we're taking cat age and multiplying it by 7. Now, this is all well and good, but we get an error here. I don't think the error is particularly useful for us. Nope, but I'll tell you what the problem is. And that's because this variable has a type of string. So this is a string, which is just a collection of characters, essentially, like a name or a sentence. And strings can't be multiplied by numbers. So Swift is what's known as a type-safe language. So every variable has a certain type, and there's a bunch of things you can do with variables of that type. And as I say, this is a string, but we're trying to now multiply a string by 7, which we can't do. So what we're going to have to do is take this string and convert it to a number type that we can multiply by 7. And the most straightforward number type, which works for us here, is an integer, which is a whole number. So I'm going to convert this from a string to an integer. And we do that using the int command. So just before catAge text field, type int with a capital I, just like that, and then put parentheses or brackets around catAge text field.text. So that will convert this, which is a string, into an integer, which is just a whole number. And then we can multiply it by 7. So that's taken care of one problem, the type problem. We've converted it from a string into an integer, but we have another problem. This command will only work if the user has actually entered a value into the box. So we have to tell Swift to what's known as unwrap this variable, which we do by putting a exclamation mark on the end. And that basically says, don't worry Swift, I know for sure that the user has entered a value into this box, and so we won't get a crash. So this unwraps the variable and tells Swift that we're sure that it has a value and allows Swift to use that value. We then need to do that one more time because this bit here says that it has a value, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be able to convert it to an integer. It might have a value of some text. So it might have the name Rob, for example, and we can't convert the text Rob to a number. So we have to also say that, don't worry, I know that it has a value, and I also know that that value is a number, which is going to be convertible to an int. And we do that again by putting another exclamation mark on the end there. So it's a very tricky concept, this idea of unwrapping. We'll come back to it again and again, so don't worry about it too much, but feel free to have a Google if you want to find out more about it at this stage, or just go back and listen to that explanation again, because it's not straightforward. Just to re-summarize, what we're doing is firstly telling Swift that there is a value in this box and we can use it, and then we're telling Swift that, don't worry, whatever value it is, it's going to be convertible to an integer. It's not a problem. Okay, then we take our integer and multiply it by 7, and you can see all our errors have now disappeared because we've done our conversion from a string to an integer. Okay, we're almost there. So now we want to update the text of the result label, and I want to update it to something like your cat is. So let's have some text, your cat is, and then we want to put in our cat age. So we want to put cat age into this string here. How are we going to do that? Well, there's a nice way of doing that in Swift, and we use the backslash and then parentheses, and in those parentheses we put the variable that we want to insert into the label name. So in this case, just cat age. So your cat is cat age, and I think I'm going to type in cat years. So what this will do is update the result label text to your cat is, and then whatever the value is for cat age, and then in cat years. And that's it. So we've been introduced to a couple of really quite tricky concepts there. Firstly, the concept of type, that we started off with a string type and we had to convert it to an integer to be able to multiply it by 7. And then we were introduced to the concept of unwrapping, which is essentially telling Swift that what we're trying to do is okay, and just being really clear that we've checked that this is not going to cause a problem. So I'm going to re-summarize what these 3 lines do. First of all, we create a variable called catAge, which takes the value of the catAge text field and tells Swift that we can definitely use it, that it definitely has a value, that it's not empty. And then it converts it to an integer, which is a whole number. And again, we use the exclamation mark to tell Swift that it will be able to be convertible to an integer, and we're not going to get an error there. And then we take our integer and we multiply it by 7, which is the calculation we need to do to get the age in cat years. And then we set the result label text to the string, your cat is, and then we insert our variable, our integer, cat age, into that in cat years. Simple. So don't worry if some of those concepts seemed a little bit unclear to you. As I say, feel free to have a Google and read more about them now if you want, or just wait because we'll see them many, many times during the rest of the course. So the important thing, of course, is to check whether or not this works. So with any luck, this will take the cat's age. So let's say the cat's age is 3, and then it multiplies it by 3. Your cat is 21 in cat years. Fabulous. We could just check that again. What if my cat is 6? 42 in cat years. Perfect. So the app works exactly as we want. You might be wondering, over here, using this exclamation mark, we told Swift that we definitely knew that there was a value in the text field. That is actually something that we don't really know. So what happens if the field is empty and I tap the button? The answer is bad things. So Swift gets very, very cross if you try and unwrap a variable which doesn't actually have a value. So that's why the exclamation mark is important. And later on in the course, what I'll do is show you a way of testing whether or not the field here does actually have a value, and then only trying to multiply it by 7 if it does have a value. And that's what we should have done here, but we haven't quite got the language to do that yet. But anyway, other than that, I hope you enjoyed making your first proper, useful is maybe too strong a word, but a bit of fun app. And in the next section, we're going to go on and look at Swift in a lot more detail and see how we can do some much more advanced things with it than what we've done so far. Hope you're excited and looking forward to that. I certainly am. And I'll see you in the next section.